Hi, so this is an extension of the workshop that we did around the organizational life cycles, change loop, and then the diagnosis and mission process that I had not gotten time to go through mission, but had sent it separately. So to recap just quickly, we talked about this organizational life cycle, and the intent was to move to prime, where we still had high levels of flexibility to deal with change, but we had the control, self-control and predictability that a prime organization needed. There was this idea of the change loop, and that successful companies identify their problems and resolve them really quickly, and they capitalize on their opportunities faster than the competitors. And to do that, we needed to be able to make really great decisions and then implement them. But obviously, if it was that easy, everyone would do it. And so there were obviously a number of conflicts getting in the way, and we talked through the conflicts that were stopping that change loop. And then this idea of integration, the fact that disintegration first sucked away energy, and only the energy that was left was available for the integration. And so it all sort of wrapped up into this idea of upgrading the operating system of the business, in how it identified its problems, in how it capitalized on its opportunities, and how we could get faster and faster at doing that year after year. And so we had again talked about an expanded success equation, where we talked about how needs get met by capabilities, and that's really where you get great integration. But energy first gets consumed by the disintegration, which was all those conflicts. And we said that to get disintegration down, we would use mutual trust and respect. And so really, again, when we talked about this operating system, it was about building mutual trust and respect, which reduced disintegration, that ensured that all the energy could go outside into your capabilities and your needs. And we said to build mutual trust and respect was actually an outcome, and that there were 4 ingredients in the right sequence that led to mutual trust and respect, and that each of those ingredients was different depending on where you were in the life cycle. And we touched on the managerial process, where we talked about the diagnosis and the categorizing, and we also talked about the mission at a very high level, but didn't get a chance to go into it. So I just wanted to go into that a bit deeper. So firstly, just to sort of recap on the diagnosis, as I've put a bit more info in there. So we talked about collecting the potential improvement points, the issues, the challenges, whatever they may be. And we discussed that we needed to have some rules. In an environment of different styles and different perceptions and all those different conflicts, if you try and sit down your organization to work out all of its challenges, if you didn't have some rules, a bit like trying to play a team sport without rules, that would be difficult, because all of these conflicts sort of conspire together to cause a problem in that change loop. And we described this idea of having some process as well, not just rules, but process for collecting those, and that there were a range of different processes available, but ensuring that you had a process. We then talked about having the integrator, the independent person, somebody that didn't have a horse in the race, so to speak, that wasn't part of this change loop, who could facilitate the process and the rules. And so a bit like having a referee in team sport, that person is there to help ultimately get a fair and a good game. And then we talked about the team composition, who should be involved in diagnosing of small or large issues. And if you remember, we drew the circles up about CAPI, the coalescing of the authority, the power, and the influence. And if you could get those 3 ingredients together, that's when you can get a good diagnosis. And we talked about categorizing first. What are the manifestations? And I suggested that there were 4 categories that we put manifestations into, and that manifestations are caused by problems in the subsystems, in the operations. When there are issues in your client interface, transformation, human factors, and financial factors, those things conspire to create the manifestations. But ultimately, those are caused by deeper rooted causes in planning, and planning is broken up into information flows, corrective action, structure in terms of the roles, the responsibilities, authorities, rewards. And remembering roles and responsibilities includes time orientation, and that if you have a role and a responsibility that includes both short-term and long-term requirements, that creates a challenge because the short term always beats the long term. And then finally, the culture. The culture for us is a combination of climate, styles, and values. And so all this area of causes all combine together to flow into the subsystems, which then flows into the manifestations. And again, the idea of this is a big, long list of potential improvement points. And when we help companies and do it, it'll be somewhere between 100, 150, 200, even 300, depending on the size and the complexity of the business. It doesn't really matter how many you've got. You've now got them broken down into this, into these different categories. And so here's sort of an example of one that we've done for an organisation. And there's nothing too confidential here. It's all quite standard for a company. This particular one, sort of a go-go, late infancy kind of business. You can see there's quite a few climactic issues that sort of combine with structural and planning kinds of things, which then flows into obviously operations. And the transformation ones are so large it's squeezed out the human factors and the financial factors, but ultimately all of those then lead into manifestation. So again, trying to keep it simple. This is quite a simple process here, but it allows the management, it allows the senior leaders, it allows boards, owners to be able to get a full picture of their organisation that helps you then start to get alignment to prioritise and start working through some of these. Again, here's another example, and just trying to come back to the life cycle a little bit. This company here, it had a big chunk inside sales and marketing. So that's an early phase company, infancy, coming into go-go potentially, where they still haven't quite got their sales and their marketing messaging going quite well. Being a young company, change, there isn't much of a manifestation there. They're sort of quite relevant. Behavior is quite low, but obviously their ineffectiveness is the highest. So they're not getting the revenues, they're not getting the sales, they're just not being effective, they're being ineffective at the moment. Here's another example. Again, this is a later stage company that's clearly through go-go because sales and marketing is quite low, but man, do they have some operational potential improvement points. And so that indicates a later phase in that what we describe go-go, which is a bit like a toddler. It's sleeping through the night now. Revenue isn't so much of a problem, but their rapid growth is starting to see some operational challenges. And you can see here, ineffectiveness is well below inefficient. So they're reasonably effective, but they're obviously quite inefficient, which again, when you're an early stage company in rapid growth mode, you often are having a lot of inefficiencies occurring. And then here's another, which is sort of a later stage organization, because we can see that there's really nothing with the financial factors. They seem to be all fine. There's a few human factors, but operations is pretty well under control compared to some of the others we've seen. But sales and marketing is quite high. Now, yes, that's the same height as, say, an infant company, but if you look here, the number of potential improvement points in change, meaning that the company isn't changing. The staff at all levels are raising manifestation issues to do with not changing. And you can see that inefficiency is very low. Again, an older company that has systems, process, and controls is generally very efficient. But because we're not meeting change, because we're not sort of moving with the times, you can see that they're becoming more and more ineffective. So they're still efficient in what they're doing, but they're not meeting the client's needs. And generally a company like this will, if it's not seeing it now, it will soon start to see revenue declines, it'll start to see some profitability issues. And we can see a big sort of issue up here in behavior. So the idea here is to try and diagnose the organization so we can really try and get some focus into what's occurring and being able to arrest the manifestations, relieve the symptoms, and ultimately release and get rid of the causes. And in that way, you're able to try and get that level of, prioritization. And so coming back to this Groundhog Day thing that we had discussed, we're somewhere here today, we want to get somewhere new, but generally we never quite achieve what we hoped because of these problems, challenges, and conflicts. And so this is what that is about. It's how do you identify what all those problems, challenges, and conflicts are so you can get them really identified and so you can start to resolve them. And once you get those down, then you can start to become more focused on, those sexier strategies, missions, and all of those. So once you've got a core competency and you've got some practice and you're being able to identify and resolve problems and you're categorizing and you're getting a lot of mutual trust and respect, that's when we say, okay, number two, we can then look at, how do we update that mission? A lot of models start with mission and strategy and vision and all of those things first. But if the organization isn't able to identify its problems, if it isn't able to get alignment, if it isn't able to get agreement, if it doesn't have full mutual trust and respect that's got very low disintegration, that's where we've got to work at first. Otherwise, if you try and do the big ticket, heavy lifting mission and strategy stuff, you fall behind. And so we'd sort of touched on this, so here we go. So really what we're doing is we're linking the internal mission. And so you can have two missions. There can be the external mission for the clients, for the market. Our mission is to change the way, whatever it might be. This is an internal mission. This is what you are going to energize your company to do over a defined period of time. And so it all links off the change loop. So the first thing is you've got to understand we are in the business of. Now, often when we help companies, we will use a range of different sort of strategic planning methodologies and tools just to help get a little bit of clarity. Especially a rapidly growing business often gets into a few too many things and it needs a bit of priority, or an aging company needs to be able to redefine its market. So we're able to use these tools just to help, what are we in the business? We are in the business of whatever it is. And then we start going through this. Right, we see the following external changes. We see the following internal changes. So often external changes are to do with the market, competitors, all sorts of environment things. And then internal changes can be things like key staff leaving or the retirements of someone or, the acquisition of different things. Again, we're trying to get it, we're trying to get all of these things down so we can then say, okay, well, the problems and opportunities we see that are going to come from these changes. So again, it's in that loop. Here's the change, here's the problems that we see, here's the opportunities that we see, which then allows us to sort of look at the decide side. So in light of these problems, this is what we're going to do. And then in light of these opportunities, this is what we're going to do. And then it sort of starts to spell out a bit of the implementation, how we're going to do these things, when we're going to do it, who's going to do it. And keep in mind, these are broad. And then finally, this idea of being able to, core values generally don't change, but being able to have periphery values that we need to add, strengthen, or remove in light of this. And the example I gave that, the values of a retail bricks and mortar store like Myer 30 years ago was probably fine 30 years ago, but in the era of the internet and Amazon on the doorstep, there's probably some values that they're clinging on to that they need to sort of update. And so, yes, this version of mission is longer than most, but it's an internal mission. And the whole idea is to get everybody on the same page, and this is the business that we're in. This is what's changing. These are the problems and opportunities, yada, yada, yada. And so when you can have it communicated to your entire organization and everybody knows why we're doing what we're doing, what we're going to do broadly, when we're going to do it, and sometimes often, depending, we might also be stating how not, when not, who not, what not, being very clear on what we're not going to do versus what we are going to do. It just allows us to get really clear and get specific. Now, again, the reason we start with the process stuff first of diagnosis is that all of these conflicts, imagine without the rules, the process, and integrator, and sort of the right team working on this, you can get into trouble pretty quickly. But if you have a core competency of that and you've practiced that, then when you come together here, yes, you're going to have different styles and different interests and different perceptions and different definitions and different values and all of those things. But if you've got it integrated, if you've got the process, if you've got the rules, you can, maybe it takes a day, maybe it takes 2 days, come together to really get this. And so the idea is that it starts institutionalizing that integration role, that idea. It could come from a different team, it could come from a different division. Often it comes externally to begin with until that is institutionalized into the company, but this role that can help harness those conflicts. It's aligned with the change loop, and that change loop is the thing that we, as we discussed, we have to keep traversing day after day, week after week, year after year. And companies that ultimately survive and thrive are the ones that are really good change loop managers. And if you can then institutionalize this ability to do mission, you're able to repeat it year after year, irrelevant of who the owners are, irrelevant of who sort of the market changes are, different drivers. If you can have an organization that can regularly respond, that can come together and say, right, we've had a big issue, maybe some big things happened. Do we need to update that mission? Do we need to have a look at those things? It explains why we're doing what we're doing. Quite often, new strategy, new things come in and say, this is what we're doing, but people don't understand why. And the why starts with, well, this is the opportunity we see. This is the problem we see. And these problems are based on these changes. So being able to sort of communicate that and get more people involved in it means you're going to be developing a lot more management talent. And then it aligns every level. If the receptionist all the way through to the CEO and board and shareholders are on the same page, then you can really harness and direct energy. And so again, we come back to this. If you can have really great process that diagnoses, decides, and implements rapidly, that allows you to come together and update that mission and value set sort of to keep getting moving towards the vision. Remember, the vision is the much longer term guiding thing that we're working towards. For a future session, I won't go through it now, but remember, structure achieves mission. And so once you've done the mission, you have to have a look and say, right, am I structured right to achieve this mission? And then finally, being able to energize people with that process and that mission. So when you have those together, you can build high mutual trust and respect, which then over here removes a lot of disintegration, which allows the majority of your energy to go outside, to solve problems, to capitalize on opportunities, to really build your capabilities to sort of complete needs. And so that's that. That's what I wanted to go through. Hopefully that fills in a few more gaps and also provides a little bit of a reminder from the original session. So remember, diagnose, using the process, using the rules, have an integrator help facilitate, make sure you've got the right people in place, get really good at that. Then that allows you to create this sort of mission structure, implement it, and ultimately you will achieve great success on your path to Prime. Thank you very much.